Chapter 43 Work smart, not hard. Here you go, sir, the receptionist said as she handed Michael the printed paper before continuing. When you get to the person in charge, please hand them this document. An email will also be sent to you with a list of things to look out for in the crack, ensuring you don't miss any opportunities. If you find items you don't need and wish to sell to the association, the email will include a list of items we're interested in, along with their prices. The exact location of the crack is written on the paper, so please refer to it when needed. Lastly, please remember that the inner workings of the association and most supernatural-related matters shouldn't be shared with the public, as stated in the email you received on the day you registered. There was something like that, Michael muttered to himself in confusion. Sir, the receptionist called out, her smile suddenly feeling sharp and unsettling. Haha, I was joking. Of course I know this. It doesn't even need to be written down for me. Anyway, thank you for your time, Michael stammered as he quickly brushed it off and walked away. He could still feel the receptionist's suspicious gaze on his back. Only when it faded did he wipe the cold sweat from his forehead. As for what she mentioned being attached to his awakening email, Michael had no clue. It couldn't have been the one with the link to the Supers Association forum, as that was the only content contained, so it must have been part of the email containing the breathing and meditation techniques, something Michael admitted he hadn't been too interested in. No wonder he missed it. Then again, it wasn't like he even had the time to share what he'd learned over the past few days. With the way he had been darting between the land of origin and the real world, even a bee would be impressed. As Michael made his way out of the association building, he glanced at the paper in his hands. He skipped over the irrelevant details after quickly scanning them and focused on the section containing the crack's location. The receptionist had mentioned Sun Park, and Michael was familiar with the area, having visited it several times as a child. However, discovering that a corrupted crack existed there was something he never would have expected. Sun Park wasn't just a park, it was a landmark in Woodstone City. Its fame also wasn't due to the park itself, but rather the establishments dominating the area. Known as the Clinic Market, 7 out of every 10 buildings in the vicinity were medical facilities. While unsettling, most residents of Woodstone City had grown used to the peculiar nickname. However, knowing there was a corrupted crack in the area made Michael pause. Corrupted cracks relied on negative energy to sustain themselves. Were better to absorb such energy than clinics or hospitals, where despair, pain, and grief often lingered. The Federation must have done this on purpose. Michael doubted the Federation would risk the public's safety without reason. After all, leaving a crack unattended for too long risked a monster outbreak, reminiscent of the chaos during the Dark Age, when cracks even gave no warning. The more negative energy the crack absorbs, the faster it can regenerate monsters. Maybe the park balances things out, as positive energy can neutralize negative. Still, too much positivity would defeat the purpose of maximizing the crack's value. If his assumptions were correct, Michael couldn't help but admire the strategic brilliance behind the decision. Yet a sense of conflict stirred within him. The Federation wasn't the heroic entity he had envisioned growing up. Their actions were pragmatic, even calculated. While he could understand the necessity of such measures, it didn't sit well with him. Even so, Michael didn't hate the Federation. It was clear their efforts ultimately benefited the public, and that deserved respect. Still, he was shocked that a crack had existed unnoticed beneath so many people's noses for years. Or perhaps it wasn't entirely unnoticed. Some older residents might have figured it out, but likely not many. What surprised Michael more, though, was the crack's exact location, inside a pharmacy. According to the receptionist, All he had to do was hand the paper directly to the person in charge. More and more, it feels like I belong to some secret organization, which isn't too far from the truth, Michael muttered. To be honest, the thought was a little exciting to him. As he walked out of the association, anticipation and anxiety swirled within him despite the power he held and his strong lineup of Lucky and Prince. But then, he abruptly stopped in his tracks. For a moment, he stood still before his expression darkened. Damn it, I'm an idiot. Michael wanted to scream at himself as a sudden realization hit him. Why was he heading to a corrupted crack in the first place? Wasn't it because of the monsters it held? And why was he interested in the monsters? It was because he wanted to turn them into his undead army. And why did he feel so pressed to contract more undead right now? It was because his daily evolution points would soon refresh. If he didn't increase the number of his undead within the next 3 hours, he'd miss out on a potential number of 11 evolution points and have to settle with 4. Contracting undead took time and mana, and failed attempts were always a possibility. If he rested between summons, 3 hours should be enough. But if he still had to hunt the monsters first, that would eat up precious time. Greedy. Michael knew he was. Every human was. Michael couldn't stand the idea of losing a good 24 hours of progress. Then it hit him. Didn't the association sell goblin corpses? Instead of wasting time hunting in the crack, he could simply buy what he could afford. Once he reached the crack, he could start using Undead Revival immediately. After all, leveling up could wait. His main concern was maximizing his evolution points. This was working smarter, not harder. As Michael stood near the entrance of the association, lost in thought, the vibration of his phone in his pocket snapped him back to reality. He pulled out his phone and saw that it was an email from the association, the notification causing his phone to buzz. Michael unlocked his phone and opened the email. It contained a lot of information, including the location and details of the crack he was about to enter, far more detailed than the paper he held in his hand. Additionally, there was a list attached to the email. This is pretty user-friendly, Michael noted. Since the email is solely about the Goblin World corrupted crack, it's likely I'll receive similar emails in the future when I want to visit other cracks for the first time. However, his attention quickly shifted to the attached list, particularly the very first item. 1 Goblin Corpse, $500. This is even better, he muttered. I can earn back whatever money I spend here, though I'd have to kill 2 goblins just to make up the cost of buying 1 goblin corpse, and it even says the price can go up to and not exactly it. Tusk, the association is as greedy as it is selfish. Having already made up his mind about his next steps, Michael turned away from the entrance and headed toward the trade center to purchase monster corpses. Upon reaching the trade center, Michael noticed a different face behind the counter. It wasn't the scarred man he'd seen yesterday. Though he briefly wondered why the other man wasn't there, he quickly brushed the thought aside. It wasn't something worth dwelling on as he and the scarred man weren't close. Good morning, Michael greeted the middle-aged man at the counter. Good morning to you too. How may I help you? The man replied with a warm smile. Do you still have monster corpses here? Yes, we do. Are you looking to purchase some? Yes, please. Compared to the cold demeanor of the scarred man from yesterday, this middle-aged man was like a ray of sunshine in winter. They were like 2 completely different species. After explaining what he needed, Michael was once again led to the cold storage area where he'd been the day before. However, this time, he wasn't here for forest wolves. Why? Because they were far too expensive for him. At $4,000 per corpse, they were entirely out of Michael's current budget. His bank account balance was only enough to buy 3 again, which wasn't a sustainable option. Had Michael known about the abilities of his talent earlier, he wouldn't have wasted $12,000 on forest wolf corpses yesterday. Instead, he would have spent the entire amount on goblin corpses. Sure, goblins had trashy base stats, and their inherent weaknesses might carry over even after evolving, potentially making them weaker than forest wolves of the same rank. But that didn't matter. Michael had identified himself as a horde-type necromancer. His strategy was simple: overwhelm his enemies with numbers. He fought to dominate by sheer force of numbers, bullying his way to victory. Having a few high-quality undead was great, but not as great as having multiple quality undead. In any case, his undead could always evolve, so their weaknesses wouldn't remain constant forever. Unfortunately, Michael, unaware of the ability of his talent, had been more focused on getting the most value out of his previous purchases. Though he felt his earlier decisions had been a waste, Michael didn't regret them. At the very least, he had acquired Lucky and Prince, two strong rank 1 undead. It would have been the same case had he bought goblin corpses too, as his evolution points yesterday could only evolve a monster so far. It might have even cost more but Michael was still unsure. Did evolving a common rank undead by 1 star cost 1 evolution point each time, or did it raise a 1-star undead directly to 3 stars, regardless of its starting point? Now that he had several goblin corpses, all at 1 star, he would soon be able to figure it out. Unlike his cautious approach to buying forest wolves yesterday, Michael didn't even glance at the ranks of the monster corpses this time. He simply purchased 10 with the highest levels available. He currently had only 7 open slots left for summoning undead, but considering the risk of failure, he bought 3 extras. Hopefully, his luck wouldn't betray him. These corpses were all providers of evolution points, after all. The purchase cost him $10,000, nearly reducing him to the same broke state he'd been in before awakening. The pain of parting with such an amount was sharper than the sting of his first heartbreak back on Earth. Still, Michael wasn't too downhearted. At most, the goblins he was about to hunt would cover the damages. After completing his purchase and making the payment, Michael wasted no time leaving the association. He quickly hailed a taxi to Sun Park, the designated location for entering the crack. His allotted time in the Goblin World Corrupted Crack was from 11:45 a.m. to 1:00 p.m., and the clock currently read 11:20 a.m. Fortunately, there was still time. Michael wasn't in a frantic rush to enter the crack. As long as he arrived and checked in, he would be fine. That said, he still hurried to get there. Seated in the taxi, Michael used the time to reread the email the association had sent him about the Goblin World crack. The email's content wasn't extensive, so within 10 minutes, he was done reading and left with nothing else to do except stare out the car window. He could have browsed the Supers Association forum, but Michael preferred to do that in a calm state of mind. Right now, he was far too preoccupied. After the taxi dropped Michael off in front of Sun Park, he quickly asked for directions to the pharmacy, where the Goblin World Corrupted-type dimensional crack was located. Since he was in a rush, Michael didn't take the time to observe his surroundings and made his way to the designated pharmacy with haste. The pharmacy wasn't far from Sun Park, and with quick strides, Michael arrived in less than 5 minutes. Contrary to his expectations, the pharmacy looked exactly like an ordinary establishment, just slightly larger than usual. From the outside, Michael could see that there were no customers inside. Without hesitation, he pushed open the door and entered. Immediately, his eyes fell on an elderly man standing behind the counter. The man had gray hair, but his body exuded a youthful vitality rarely seen even in younger individuals. Suppressing the urge to use detect on the old man, Michael approached him to start a conversation. "Good morning, Michael greeted politely. His words revealed that he was still on time. It wasn't noon yet, at least not for another 5 minutes. The old man behind the counter smiled warmly and responded, "Good morning, boy. Is there anything you need?" "Yes, sir. The association sent me here." Michael got straight to the point, though he remained cautious not to reveal what association in case he was in the wrong place. Fortunately, it seemed he wasn't mistaken. "Oh, do you have the application paper with you?" the old man asked while retrieving a fingerprint scanner from underneath the counter. Seeing this, Michael was reassured that he had come to the right place. Wasting no time, he pulled the document the association's receptionist had given him out of his pocket. Though the paper looked a bit crumpled, it was still legible and neat. Michael hadn't been provided with anything to store it in, so he could only carry it as it was. Luckily, the old man made no comment about the paper's condition. Instead, he calmly read through its contents without issue. "Okay, place your right thumb here," the old man, who appeared to be in his late 50s, instructed, pointing at the scanner on the counter. The scanner looked similar to the one the receptionist had used when registering Michael on the day of his awakening. Perhaps this was the Federation standard scanner, Michael thought as his mind briefly wandered. Shaking off his thoughts, Michael complied and placed his thumb on the scanner. 2 seconds later, it emitted a green light. "Good, your identity has been confirmed. Follow me," the old man said, returning the scanner to its original place before gesturing for Michael to come around the counter. Michael hurried to comply. They passed through rows of neatly arranged medicine shelves before arriving at a sturdy-looking door. The old man placed his palm on a panel to unlock it. Beyond this door was another, secured by a password that he entered quickly. Michael couldn't help but be impressed by the security measures, though he still felt they were a bit lacking, depending on the circumstances. Of course, much of the defense likely relied on the old man himself. Although the man didn't exude the overwhelming, oppressive aura of the scarred man Michael had encountered at the trade center, there was something subtly dangerous about him. Michael's senses, while still developing, could pick up on a faint, underlying threat. This seemingly kind old man was far more dangerous than he appeared. After the second sturdy metal door was unlocked, Michael finally stood before the entrance of a dimensional crack for the first time. True to its name, it resembled a tear in empty space. Within the jagged opening was a swirling mass of black, chaotic mana. Even without knowing it was a corrupted-type dimensional crack, Michael could tell at a glance that it wasn't anything good. The ominous feeling it gave made him sweat slightly. For a moment, he felt as though something might erupt from the crack at any second. Why didn't I feel anything outside? Is it because of the door? Michael wondered, but he quickly dismissed the thought. When he focused on the walls flanking the crack and the floor beneath his feet, he could faintly sense an intricate network of magic circles surrounding him. Though invisible to the naked eye, he could feel their presence, almost as if they were etched into the air itself. Is this the magic formation they mentioned in the forums? Michael's thoughts didn't have the chance to go much deeper before the old man beside him spoke, snapping him back to reality. "Your information says you're an awakener, which should be obvious since you're entering a crack without carrying any kind of storage," the old man said. Michael could detect a slight trace of envy in his voice. Unlike the disdain he'd felt from the scarred man at the Association Trade Center yesterday, this reaction made sense to him. Being an awakener was, after all, an enviable status. "Be mindful of your surroundings once you're inside," the old man continued. "While it's unlikely that you'll land in a monster stronghold upon entry, there have been cases where it's happened. Stay alert." Michael was startled and opened his mouth to respond, but the old man cut him off. "That's all. You should have read the email the association sends to anyone visiting a dimensional crack, so I won't repeat the basics. Since you came here alone, I'll assume you're confident in your abilities, which is good. Just be cautious." The old man glanced at his watch. "It's 12 now, so you must be back before 1 p.m. The time difference between the real world and the crack is 10 to 1. 10 hours in the crack is equivalent to 1 hour here. Don't spend more than 10 hours inside, or you'll risk penalties. Once you're out, press the button behind the door and I'll open it for you." He gestured towards the crack impatiently. "That's all. Enter quickly, I have other things to attend to." Michael blinked at the old man's brusque attitude, but decided not to comment. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself. Determination flashed across his face as a gun materialized in his hand. Without hesitation, Michael leaped into the crack. Michael felt his vision blur as he entered the crack. For a moment, all he saw was chaotic darkness. The next instant, he found himself in the middle of a vast forest. "Lucky," he called out. Without taking time to observe his surroundings, Michael gripped his gun tightly and summoned Lucky from the netherworld. A greenish-black circle materialized on the ground in front of him, and the silhouette of a massive wolf leapt out. It was Lucky. At the same time, Michael retrieved Prince from his storage space to guard his back. While Prince's mind remained frozen in time, unable to develop consciousness, Lucky was already alert. Sensing his master's unease through their link, Lucky immediately assumed a combat stance upon arrival. Fortunately, after a tense few seconds, nothing attacked. Michael finally let out a sigh of relief. While keeping the two on high alert, Michael finally took the time to survey his surroundings. Tall trees stretched high into the sky. Wide crowns formed a leafy canopy, allowing golden rays of sunlight to filter through. The forest floor, carpeted in moss and scattered leaves, glowed softly under the shifting light. The air was alive with the faint rustle of leaves. The sight was breathtaking. Though I've read about cracks containing entire worlds, seeing it in person is amazing. There was even a sun. As for wondering how many cracks might have their own individual sun like Aurora, he quickly brushed the thought aside. Still, something about this world unsettled him. The mana in this space feels scattered. No, it feels incomplete. It was hard to describe, but there was an odd sensation, a fragility, a weakness he hadn't felt in Aurora or the land of origin. He couldn't pinpoint what was wrong, but there was no time to dwell on it. "Prince, stay here with me and guard. Lucky, scout the surroundings and kill anything that moves." The moment he gave the command, Lucky vanished in a blur, leaving behind a gust of wind and a cloud of dirt. "Cough, cough, that stupid wolf. Do you think feeding your master dirt is funny? I'll start feeding you grass." Michael paused, remembering the time Lucky had tried to eat moss off a wall in the land of origin. Actually, he might enjoy that, Michael muttered, shaking his head to dismiss the ridiculous thought. Michael was genuinely surprised by the movement caused by Lucky's incredible speed. The speed itself was astonishing, leaving behind an afterimage as Lucky vanished from sight. Since rare-rank creatures were said to rival awakeners who used attribute points, Lucky's stats had to far exceed 20 points for a human. Being a wolf, its speed should be even more terrifying. The strength of his undead truly satisfied Michael, but it also left him suspicious. Although he hadn't tested Lucky's speed in the real world or the land of origin yet, he doubted it would be strong enough to generate such a massive gust of wind. Michael suspected it might have something to do with the nature of this world, but he couldn't confirm it without running tests in the other worlds. Just as he was about to continue inspecting his surroundings, several notification panels appeared before his eyes. Your undead, Lucky, has killed a level 3 goblin and gained 35 EXP. You've received feedback from your undead, Lucky, and gained 10 EXP. Your undead, Lucky, has killed a level 1 goblin and gained 14 EXP. You've received feedback from your undead Lucky and gained 4 EXP. Your undead Lucky has killed a level 5 goblin and gained 48 EXP. You've received feedback from your undead Lucky and gained 14 EXP. The notifications continued 4 more times before finally stopping. Did Lucky just wipe out an entire goblin group? Michael was both alarmed and stunned. He quickly focused on their link to sense Lucky's rough location. Noticing he could still pinpoint it, Michael deduced Lucky was within 100 meters. Unranked awakeners, whose souls don't undergo significant upgrades until they advance in rank, could only command and sense their undead within roughly 100 meters. This range varied slightly depending on talent but generally stayed consistent at this distance. Coincidentally, this also matched the current range of share senses, a skill Michael gained when his intelligence stat hit 20 points. Share senses, Michael muttered as he activated the skill and stepped closer to Prince. He didn't bother recalling Lucky. There was no need. Goblins posed no threat to Lucky, though Michael himself couldn't afford to be careless. Deciding to stay cautious, he used the skill to check on Lucky's situation. Immediately, his vision shifted. From a vibrant world of colors, it turned to stark black and white. "Is this how the world looks to the undead?" Michael murmured, momentarily intrigued. Lucky was standing amidst the mangled corpses of the goblins he had just slain. Even with the monochrome view, Michael easily recognized the grotesque forms of the creatures. He had a few in his storage space after all. The sight, however, caused Michael's heart to ache. "Lucky, you idiot. Stop wasting money. Those corpses could feed you and your siblings." Panicking, Michael sent a mental command for Lucky to stay put, fearing the wolf would kill more goblins and waste precious resources. As for feeding his undead, Michael wasn't exaggerating. While undead didn't need to eat and had infinite stamina, there were indeed substances they could digest that provided benefits or simply appealed to their preferences. Michael was about to run to Lucky's location with Prince when he suddenly stopped and glanced at his other undead. "Prince, what do you think about letting Daddy ride you?" Prince stared at Michael, confusion evident in his newly awakened consciousness. As Michael addressed his undead, he turned to check how many experience points he had left to level up. Status: Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level 5. Exp: 208,800. Strength: 6.1. Agility: 11.1. Constitution: 7.7. Intelligence: 30.3. Attribute points: 0. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 3/10. Gift: Mark of Origin. Michael knew his main priority now was creating more undead within the next 2 hours, but Lucky's actions of killing goblins sparked an idea. He had almost forgotten that, when an undead killed a target, a portion of the gained experience points was transferred to the Necromancer. At first glance, this might seem like a loss, as the Necromancer would have earned more experience points by killing the target personally. However, Necromancers were never meant to be frontline warriors. Their strength lay in commanding their undead minions to do the fighting for them. Moreover, the strength of an undead was directly tied to the strength of its master. Investing in the growth of his minions wasn't a waste, it was a strategic move. With his undead gaining experience and growing stronger, Michael could avoid putting himself in unnecessary danger while still gradually accumulating experience points to level up. This indirect approach to combat was the essence of a Necromancer's playstyle, and it suited Michael perfectly. As someone who was particularly cautious about his safety, especially in the real world, Michael found this method of fighting to be both efficient and reassuring. Should I just wait until I fill my contract slots, or have Lucky kill monsters for me while Prince guards me? Michael muttered to himself. However, he soon shook his head at the thought. If someone's going to guard me, I'd rather it be Lucky. Weird as it is, Lucky is far more flexible and should be able to protect me better than Prince, whose intelligence is still lacking. The Prince, who stood loyally by his master's side, couldn't help but feel that his master was thinking poorly of him. No, his master must be thinking ill of him. Why else would he look at him with that faint expression of disdain? It's something to think about, Michael continued, oblivious to Prince's thoughts. But for now, having more undead is the priority. Anyway, I have 10 hours here, so I can always level up later, if there are enough goblins, that is. Still, I could try killing a few goblins myself to level up faster and unlock more undead slots. Evolution points are crucial. I don't see myself being strong enough to personally face that gargoyle anytime soon, but with enough evolution points, my undead might. Michael doubted evolving Lucky to a 3-star undead would make it rank up to rank 2. It might only gain a few levels at most. However, evolving it to an extraordinary rank might do the trick, though the evolution points required would be significant. It had been barely 3 days since his awakening, and while he hadn't gained much from the land of origin to obsess over it, the restriction on exploring still frustrated him. Yet, given the opportunity presented by the suspected ruins at his initial location, he didn't want to risk rushing in and dying before reaping any benefits. Aside from not wanting to lose potential rewards in the ruins, Michael was already at the point where the 10% permanent loss of all stats upon death felt painful, especially for his intelligence stat. With that, Michael stopped mulling over the issue and hopped onto Prince's back. Head in this direction, boy. Let's go meet that wastrel called your older brother. Black. For a brief moment, Prince wondered what his purpose in life was. The ride was incredibly short. It felt like only a second passed before Michael found himself standing in front of his first named undead, Lucky. It was thrilling nonetheless. The gust of wind from the run had almost thrown Michael off Prince's back. For some reason, Michael felt as though the action had been deliberate. However, thinking about how his undead only had love for him, Michael dismissed the thought. How could they not love him? After all, he was their evolution plug. Prince. Surprisingly, despite the blood splattered everywhere from the goblins Lucky had slain, Michael wasn't disgusted by the sight or smell. Perhaps it was because goblins had green blood, and their form, while humanoid, was so far removed from humans that it didn't bother him, aside from the initial disgust. However, it could also be that nothing could disgust him more than the acid slime from the land of origin. The smell of those things was so vile it could make even a fresh corpse gag in disgust. These are heavy losses, Michael muttered in pain, gazing at the mutilated remains of the goblins scattered around. He no longer blamed Lucky. He had, after all, ordered Lucky to kill whatever moved in the crack but hadn't specified how. Lucky, while not acting in line with Michael's unspoken expectations, had followed the order to the letter. Whatever, this should still fetch something at the trade center, but it's better to have intact corpses like the ones I brought to maximize profits. Michael dismounted Prince and began gathering the goblins' corpses and scattered body parts, placing them into his storage space. Once done, he made his way to Lucky and hopped onto his back. Sure enough, riding you feels more majestic, Michael said with a pleased smile. Lucky's taller, more imposing appearance compared to Prince satisfied his vanity. Prince, degrees Japanese letter degrees. Let's move. The smell might attract more goblins, Michael ordered. Within moments, he and his undead left the area, searching for a more secluded spot. Killing monsters and gaining experience was great, but collecting evolution points, that was the real priority. Michael had his goals straight. Unfortunately, all Michael found was an endless expanse of forest and more goblins along the way, which Prince attended to with ease. This time, the method of killing was straightforward. A swipe of Prince's tail sent the goblins sprawling, and Michael finished them off with his gun, earning a steady stream of experience points. Afterward, Prince carefully lifted the goblin corpses with his mouth so Michael could place them into his storage space. Michael hadn't bothered to restock his limited bullets, knowing they would soon become useless. He had originally brought them for self-protection as part of his preparation for entering the land of origin. However, with Prince and Lucky by his side, his reliance on them had diminished and would only continue to do so. For now, though, the few rounds he had left were sufficient. Lucky also joined the fight, utilizing his racial skill, plant control instead. It was Michael's first time seeing the skill in action, and it proved highly effective. The skill's binding effect was exceptional, preventing many of the goblins from escaping. Unfortunately, Lucky wasn't fully accustomed to the ability yet. If he were, he could have trapped the entire goblin group from the start, leaving Michael free to finish them all with his gun using basic shot. As time ticked away, Michael grew frustrated and decided to start creating undead on the spot. He reasoned that if a goblin interrupted his skill, the worst outcome would be some mana loss. Also, he reflected on his earlier hesitation. He realized he had been overly cautious. Before any goblin could even reach him, they would likely be dead. With this thought in mind, Michael finally set aside his worries. He took out a relatively intact corpse he had obtained from the trade center and used Undead Revival on it. Including the goblins he had killed and the corpses brought from the association, Michael now had 24 usable materials for creating undead. This ensured that even if a revival attempt failed, he still had plenty of corpses to use, as long as he had enough mana. For the next 2 hours, Michael focused solely on casting Undead Revival on the goblin corpses, while Lucky and Prince, his 2 rank 1 undead, guarded him against any sneaky or ambushing goblins. For corpses that failed to revive after 3 attempts, Michael set them aside in a specific section of his storage space for easy identification. He planned to sell these failed corpses to the association, ensuring they knew they could no longer be used for revival. This way, he could avoid any penalties because of accusations of fraud. The price would be dirt cheap though, but extra money nevertheless. As for the undead he successfully revived, Michael kept them close, adding them to the defensive formation alongside Lucky and Prince. In the end, just as there were 3 minutes left before he received his daily evolution points, Michael finally managed to fill his remaining 7 open contract slots, going through a total of 15 monster corpses. Although he had hoped for a better outcome, this wasn't bad. Out of 15 attempts, he succeeded in reviving 7 undead. Essentially, he succeeded once every 2 tries. Michael was satisfied with the result. If his last attempt hadn't succeeded, he would have been left with only 6 undead due to his now depleted mana. For that, he was grateful. As the final 3 minutes ticked down to 10 seconds, Michael sat on the ground amidst his undead, waiting patiently. 10, 9, 8. 3, 2, 1. Your daily evolution points have arrived. 11 evolution points gained. After the notifications appeared, Michael quickly dismissed them and opened his talent panel to check his updated points. Talent Infinite Evolution. Evolution points 11. Evolvable. Lucky Undead Verdant Wolf LV. 11 insufficient evolution points, can't be evolved. Prince Undead Verdant Wolf LV. 11 insufficient evolution points, can't be evolved. Undead Forest Wolf LV. 5 sufficient evolution points can be evolved. Undead Goblin LV. 5 sufficient evolution points can be evolved. Undead Goblin LV. 5 sufficient evolution points can be evolved. Undead Goblin LV. 4 sufficient evolution points can be evolved. There were 10 undead listed in total. As expected, the number of contract undead he had at the time of his daily evolution, points refresh determined how many points he would receive. Michael was pleased to have his evolution points replenished again. This method of gaining points was far superior to relying on spirit crystals. Spirit crystals were not only rare and expensive, especially for an awakener in his situation, but they also had other critical uses that made exchanging them for evolution points less practical. Of course, if Michael had any spirit crystals right now, they would already have been traded for points. All things considered, his daily refresh was proving to be an excellent and consistent source. The main limitation now was his lack of contract slots, which was tied to his level. More levels meant more slots, enabling him to raise additional undead. While Michael didn't expect to rank up within the Goblin World crack, it was simply impossible. He did think leveling up a few more times here was achievable. Goblins were prolific breeders, reaching adulthood in mere days and hitting their 1-star common rank limit quickly. With time flowing 10 times faster in this space compared to the outside world, these creatures had plenty of opportunities to multiply and develop. Although Michael had already wiped out 3 goblin groups, it likely accounted for less than 1% of the total population here. If that was the case, this crack was an excellent place to level up. Though Michael was excited about his newly refreshed evolution points, and tempted to evolve his new undead race to see its rare rank look, he decided to hold off for now. He planned to follow the same approach as the previous day, evolve his undead in the land of origin while resting his original body back at home. Now that he had evolution points, there was no need to rush. It was more efficient to spend his time in the crack leveling up, aiming to increase his level by at least 1. This would free up more contract slots, allowing him to summon additional undead and generate even more evolution points tomorrow. Michael had already noticed that even with 11 evolution points, it wasn't enough to increase Lucky's or Prince's potential. This made acquiring more points an urgent priority. While evolving his main force was essential, neglecting his other undead wasn't an option either. Ultimately, it all came back to one critical goal: more evolution points. With determination surging through every fiber of his being, Michael transported his undead and the collected corpses to the land of origin via his storage space. Once ready, he set out with Lucky and Prince to hunt more goblins. Having already spent 2 hours in the crack, he had less than 8 hours left before risking a penalty from the association. For the next several hours, Michael did nothing but kill goblins, store their corpses in the land of origin, and repeat. In the first hour, he leveled up to level 6. 2 hours later, he reached level 8. 3 hours after that, with less than 2 hours remaining, Michael leveled up to level 9. Status: Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level 9. Exp 112,2000. Strength 7312. Agility 13,120. Constitution 8912. Intelligence 34,340. Attribute points 24. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 10/18. Gift: Mark of Origin. Though goblins were among the weakest monsters, with even less potential than slimes, yes, slimes, and provided less experience compared to some monsters of the same level, their sheer numbers made up for it. In just 6 hours, Michael ran through the majority of the crack space, clearing all the goblins he encountered with Lucky and Prince. The gains were significant. For one, he gained 4 levels, bringing him to level 9. Additionally, He stored numerous monster corpses in the land of origin, where his other body and new undead were stationed. Selling them should bring him good profit. Another noteworthy achievement was his first taste of close combat. With his bullets finally depleted, Michael used the iron-refined spear he had bought from the Super Association's online store. The result? Close combat isn't so scary after all, Michael thought, growing more confident. However, despite hours of fighting with the spear, the skill, spearmanship, never appeared. On bone of his aimless stroll through the forum, Michael learned that weapons could have their own skills to guide mastery levels. It made sense since weapon-related classes also had class skill. For example, a swordsman's swordsmanship skill would start at intermediate mastery, which could instantly turn a novice into a veteran. Even after failing to gain a spear-related skill, Michael wasn't discouraged. While he didn't plan to change his combat style, having the skill would boost his personal strength. He resolved to dedicate more time to spear training when possible. If weapon-related skills existed, it was likely that veteran awakeners from decades ago, regardless of their class, had mastered weapon skills, giving them an undeniable edge. Perhaps even a tailor could secretly be a sword expert. The world inside the crack is really big, Michael thought as he made his way toward the crack's exit, which had opened after he killed all the goblins in this corrupted-type crack. He estimated the crack's size to be comparable to a very large town. Fortunately, one only needed to kill a third of the monsters within a corrupted crack for the exit to appear. However, if it wasn't entered within 10 minutes, it would disappear and reappear only after another third of the monsters were killed, repeating until all the creatures were eliminated. Only then will the exit not disappear. Michael, however, had been merciless, killing all the goblins instead. Michael was drenched in green blood, not his own, but that of the countless goblins he had slain. His green eyes gleamed with a murderous intent, tainted by the eerie necromantic energy that had corrupted his once clean aura. This was a consequence of repeatedly casting necromancy spells in the real world using his original body. He had killed hundreds of goblins, accumulating more than 4,000 EXP in 6 hours. Leveling up had been demanding. Level 6 required 800 EXP, Level 7 needed 1,000, Level 8 required 1,200, and Level 9 demanded 1,500. A place like the Goblin world, teeming with monsters, was perfect for such rapid progression. The intoxicating pace of improvement filled Michael with a hunger for more. Yet, he understood that this fast leveling was only possible in the early stages. As he progressed, the grind would become exponentially harder. Even now, as an unranked awakener, it had taken killing hundreds of goblins to achieve just 4 levels. At least Michael had managed to level up. Lucky and Prince's experience progress wasn't even halfway to their next level. This was largely because Michael had secured most of the kills, while Lucky and Prince mainly used their skills to trap the goblins. However, even if one of them had hunted all the monsters in the crack alone, the experience would have barely been enough for a single level up. Hundreds of lives were needed just to level up once, and reaching rank 2 at level 26 was still over 10 levels away. If he continued hunting only goblins, how many lives would he need to take to reach that milestone? Seems like I'll need to visit that level 2 crack and apply for more crack entries, Michael planned. His mindset was shifting. After fighting and killing goblins, watching their blood spill, Michael had shed some of his caution and was now more willing to take risks for greater rewards. Level 2 cracks could contain at most a peak rank 2 creature, which either Lucky or Prince should handle alone or together without much trouble. At the very least, with their combined abilities, escaping from danger wouldn't be a problem. Leveling up had also made Michael stronger. If he allocated his attribute points to his physical stats, he might be able to handle most rank 2 creatures or escape if necessary. However, now that he was a true necromancer, he wouldn't waste his potential on such a basic approach. A smarter way to grow stronger was to increase his intelligence, contract more undead, and gain more evolution points. These would allow him to evolve his undead to the rare rank, advancing them to rank 1 and granting feedback that would boost his own stats. However, all of this would have to wait until after he left the crack. Michael glanced at his blood-soaked body and hoped the pharmacy would have a place for him to clean up. He hadn't really considered the practical issues of entering a crack. There was going to be fighting, but he hadn't even packed a spare set of clothes. There was also something that confused him. Michael had killed over 300 goblins, and 1/3 of that would be a little more than 100. Other people would typically kill around 100 goblins to make the exit appear, but how did they transport the bodies? Outside the crack was a pharmacy, and beyond that was the world of ordinary people. Supernaturals were still warned not to reveal anything to the public, so how did others transport their kills? For some reason, a part of Michael felt that his identity as an awakener made his approach to these situations different from the common sense of other supernaturals due to his unique abilities. In simpler terms, he was a little dense. But this was due to his lacking knowledge. One couldn't forget that Michael was still just an ordinary human whose life had changed drastically in barely 3 days. Compared to how most people would react to such a change, he was adapting well. Perhaps it was due to his original body's temperament or his past life mental strength, but he was only in his early 20s on Earth. It could very well be a combination of both. As several thoughts and plans raced through Michael's mind, he stepped into the crack. Michael returned to a familiar, dimly lit room. Well, not exactly familiar, just the confined space that held the crack leading to the goblin world. Turning to look behind him, Michael noticed the crack still had its chaotic appearance but seemed tamer than before. It was still chaotic, just not as overwhelmingly so as it had been 6 hours ago, or rather, less than an hour in the real world. Cracks, if controlled, could be treasures. One could train inside for 10 years, while only a year passed in the real world. Perhaps the Federation had already harnessed such a capability, though Michael wasn't qualified to know yet. As for the crack's reduced chaotic energy, he figured it was likely due to his complete extermination of the monster population within it, leading it to enter a state of recovery. Monsters in corrupted-type cracks were born from concentrated negative energy and bred quickly, as the cracks accelerated their growth. Even with regular cleanups, there had still been over 300 goblins. Usually, no one wiped out all the monsters in a crack, not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. Despite their weakness, goblins were still rank 1 monsters in the cultivation system. Cleanup efforts were often limited to earning rewards while preventing crack outbreaks, where monsters spilled into the real world, causing harm to the general population. While goblins seemed weak from Michael's perspective, they were deadly threats to ordinary people. Even new awakeners or early-stage rank 1 cultivators weren't exempt. For newly ascended rank 1 cultivators, goblins were especially challenging. Goblins often moved in groups, with the weakest being as strong as a full-grown adult. Without skills or proper training, newly awakened individuals were no better off than those novice cultivators. Michael shifted his gaze from the crack and headed for the door of the room. Recalling the instructions, he pressed the button behind the door as the old man had told him earlier. After pressing it, he waited. 5 minutes later, there was movement from the other side, and the door finally opened. The old pharmacist appeared, but before Michael could ask if there was a place to clean up, the man's expression shifted. His face tightened into a frown as his eyes locked on Michael. "Why is the chaotic energy less intense than before?" the old man asked, his voice cold and sharp. As he spoke, a threatening aura radiated from him, suffocating the air in the room. Gone was the kind, gentle demeanor of the elderly man from the pharmacy. What stood before Michael now was an old predator, exuding the presence of someone who had just awakened from a dormant state. I don't know, Michael stammered, trying to form a response. For one, he truly didn't know why the crack had appeared tamer. He suspected it was linked to wiping out all the monsters, but he wasn't certain. Secondly, the old man's overwhelming aura was far stronger than Michael had anticipated. It didn't just rival Lucky's, it surpassed it. Are all old men so powerful nowadays? Michael thought, the image of the scarred old man from the land of origin flashing across his mind. He was just about to steady himself and share his suspicions when the suffocating aura suddenly vanished, replaced by the old man's warm and kind smile. "Oh, did you kill all the monsters in the crack, boy?" the old man asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Yes," Michael replied. "Ah, no wonder it's less intense now. The crack is probably trying to recover by creating new bobbies." The old man chuckled lightly. How does his face change so fast? Michael thought, feeling slightly unnerved. "Don't be annoyed by my earlier reaction," the old man said apologetically. "The crack is vital to Woodstone City and the Federation. I can't help but be alarmed if I think something has gone wrong with it. Besides, I'd be in a lot of trouble if it had." His genuine tone and remorseful expression dissolved Michael's sour mood. "If I were in his position, I'd probably act the same," Michael admitted to himself. Michael nodded at the apology, pondering how to ask the old man if the pharmacy had a place where he could clean up. Before he could gather his words, the old man's attention shifted from the crack to him. "You're quite ruthless, boy, but calm down. Your murderous intent is too strong. If you go home like this, you'll probably scare the living daylights out of everyone, unless you live alone. And what's with this gloomy aura around you?" Michael blinked, taken aback by the old man's blunt remarks, and was just about to respond when the man continued. "Still, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with you. Just take a rest, or better yet, don't go home tonight if it'll take time for you to get your bearings. Now follow me. You need to clean yourself up." From start to finish, the old man moved at his own pace, leaving Michael no choice but to comply. Besides, Michael was too drained to take the initiative in the conversation. Fortunately, after leaving the crack, the old man led him to another hidden room, this one a spacious bathhouse, clearly designed to accommodate multiple people. It seemed bathing services were common for hunters who frequented the area. However, there was still one glaring issue. "You didn't bring a spare set of clothes." The old man gave Michael a strange look before adding mercilessly, "What kind of newbie are you?" Michael's face flushed with embarrassment. It was careless of him to not bring extra clothing when heading into a monster-filled crack, but mistakes were inevitable on a first try. He was just about to ask if the old man had spare clothing when the man interrupted again. "All right, never mind. Just get yourself cleaned up, you stink. I'll find you something to wear, but hurry up. I've got other matters to deal with." "Thank you," Michael said quickly, grateful despite the old man's gruff tone. "This fits you really well," the old man said, gazing at the oversized clothes he had picked out for Michael from a nearby store with a look of satisfaction. Michael could only roll his eyes discreetly at the old man's attitude. The clothes were of high quality. Michael figured they must have cost quite a bit, but the problem was that they were too big. Not so oversized that they looked like hand-me-downs from an older relative, but just enough to feel like they'd been passed down from an older brother. Still, Michael felt touched by the old man's gesture. After trying the clothes on, he had intended to ask how much they had cost so he could pay the old man back later. However, the old man had looked ready to flare up at the mere suggestion. Apparently, asking about the price was considered insulting, and the old man had firmly insisted that Michael accept the clothes as a gift rather than talk nonsense. Michael recalled his aunt saying that older people often had peculiar temperaments, but this was the first time he had encountered such an instance himself. He reasoned that perhaps older people, whether they were ordinary humans or cultivators, tended to be well off and prone to such behavior. Regardless, Michael made a mental note to remember this favor. He also reminded himself that unless he wanted to wander the streets naked in broad daylight, he should make better preparations before entering another crack. Not everyone in charge of a crack would be as kind as this old man. "Thank you, sir, but before I leave, may I ask what I should call you?" Michael asked. He was genuinely curious about the old man and felt it would be improper not to at least know the name of someone who had helped him. "Just call me Old Man Liu. Now get going and return to the association so you can submit your corpses for sale. And remember, if you want to collect the other corpses from the crack, your transportation better be here within an hour. After that, those corpses will start to rot, and you won't get much for them." Michael was momentarily stunned by the old man's words. Coincidentally, Old Man Liu had answered a question that had been on Michael's mind. How did non-awakeners transport their corpses from cracks? Sure, they could bring their own storage bags, but unless they functioned like his unique storage space, Michael doubted the bags could hold much, especially not enough monster corpses for a large team. Of course, it was also possible that most people didn't take entire monster corpses, instead opting to harvest only valuable parts. He remembered the list attached to the email the association had sent him about Goblin World. It didn't just specify goblin corpses. It also included items like their blood and other materials. Perhaps that was what most people gathered. If so, it made sense that a team's storage bags would suffice for a crack visit. But what if someone wanted to bring more? The old man's earlier comment provided the answer. Visitors to cracks could bring their own transportation. When Old Man Liu mentioned this, Michael couldn't help but think of trucks. "No wonder there's a garage attached to the pharmacy," he muttered to himself. "I thought that was a weird design." Michael figured this was likely another hidden function of the pharmacy, considering it already had doors to another dimension and even a bathroom. It wasn't far-fetched to assume it could also provide a cover for transporting harvested monster parts for sale. Michael had only recently become a part of the supernatural world. Before that, he had been a struggling youth, so it was natural for him to be unaware of these logistics. Perhaps wealthier and more influential people, like Leoveni, who had even suggested he buy corpses from the association, would know much more about this society. Michael hadn't forgotten about the existence of places that bred monsters either. He figured that, just like him, most average people were probably oblivious to such things. Only the rich and powerful would have access to that kind of information. Even in the supernatural world, there were differences. "There's no need for that, Old Man Liu. I already have them all packed," Michael said. "Okay, that's good. Then get going. You've been interrupting my business for too long." Michael wanted to retort that there probably wasn't any business happening at the pharmacy. He'd been here for so long and hadn't seen a single customer, but he was wise enough to keep that thought to himself. "All right, Old Man Liu, take care. See you later," Michael said with a wave. "See you later, too," the old man replied gruffly. Just like that, Michael finally left the pharmacy, the crack and Old Man Liu behind. He hailed a taxi and headed back to the association. Once there, he made his way directly to the trade center. It was finally time to earn some money. After this, he planned to visit the receptionist to apply for more crack entries. With that gargoyle blocking his way in the land of origins, he had no choice but to focus on making himself stronger in the real world while accumulating evolution points. Leveling up through battles alone would be too slow, but Michael figured that with enough evolution points, it wouldn't take long to create an undead strong enough to deal with the gargoyle. It would need to be either a higher rank undead or a level 21, 3-star rare rank 1 to stand a chance without taking a severe beating. As for going home, Michael had reconsidered after hearing Old Man Liu's comment about his murderous intent. It didn't seem like something ordinary people would react well to, so he decided to delay his return. He'd messaged Aunt Mia about it, and to his surprise, she'd immediately called him. Wasn't this woman supposed to be busy at work? After he'd vaguely explained that he had some business to take care of, Aunt Mia hadn't flared up as he'd expected. Instead, she simply told him to take care of himself several times. Michael could hear the subtle sadness in her voice, which made him feel a little guilty, but also somewhat relieved. Unfortunately, this meant he wouldn't be able to enjoy her cooking today. Apparently, his cousin was in for a good meal instead. Michael knew that girl would never let his share go to waste, especially when it involved beast meat. Michael had another purpose at the trade center. It was related to his evolution points. Michael placed the highest priority on anything that could help him with them. He didn't believe there were only a few limited ways to increase his evolution points. There had to be other methods beyond simply waiting for them to refresh daily or absorbing spirit crystals. Michael's theory about his evolution points was that they were generated from the overflow of soul energy absorbed by his talent from him and his undead. This gave him a potential direction to explore. If he could find items that could recover or enhance soul energy, would his evolution points also increase? Whatever the case, it had to be more cost-effective than relying on spirit crystals. Not only did it need to be cheaper, but it also had to be efficient enough to make the investment worthwhile. Soon, Michael arrived at the trade center, where a slight surprise awaited him. The person he encountered wasn't the man he had seen an hour ago, but the scarred man from yesterday. Michael couldn't deny that the man intimidated him a little. "Good afternoon," Michael greeted as he approached. "Good afternoon. What do you want?" the scarred man replied curtly. There was no recognition in his tone or demeanor, which made the atmosphere feel even more strained as he got straight to business. "I'm here to sell monster corpses and buy some items as well. The corpses are quite a lot," Michael explained. I see," the man muttered with a slight look of interest before asking, "What type of monster?" "Goblins," Michael replied, watching as the faint interest in the scarred man's eyes instantly vanished. But then Michael added, "I have about 300 corpses here." "You what?" For the first time since they'd met, a different expression appeared on the man's face. Michael felt a flicker of satisfaction. Finally, he had cracked the stoic demeanor of the scarred man. It made him feel like his near-genocide of goblins in their world was worth it, not just for the income, but for this reaction as well. However, he quickly shook his head. "Why do I care about changing this guy's expression?" Michael didn't have time to reflect further, as the scarred man recovered from his shock and finally spoke. "Did you hunt them yourself?" the scarred man asked. For some reason, Michael noticed that his tone seemed less cold. "Yes, I went to the Goblin World corrupted crack today and kind of wiped them out," Michael replied hesitantly. As he spoke, a sudden thought crossed his mind. Maybe I was a bit too murderous. No, they were just EXP and money. Killing them isn't a sin, Michael told himself firmly. Yeah, I'm not the problem here. Oddly enough, the scarred man seemed to follow a similar train of thought. He even let out a short laugh, startling Michael. Haha, that's great. This is how our Federation's youth should be, domineering. Michael got the distinct impression that if he had been standing closer, the man might have given him a pat on the shoulder. Thankfully, after making his statement, the scarred man switched back to business mode. This time, though, he seemed a bit kinder. "Follow me. We need to check the quality of the corpses and determine the price." "Yes." Though Michael found the scarred man's accommodating behavior a bit unfamiliar, he quickly adapted. They walked side by side, bypassing any doors this time, until they reached a staircase leading to a well-lit underground space. The area was surprisingly spacious. Or rather, the Supers Association branch itself was massive. If this was just a branch, Michael couldn't help but wonder how enormous the headquarters would be. Under the scarred man's supervision, Michael began summoning the goblin corpses he and his undead had killed. The process took some time, especially since he had to transfer the corpses from the land of origin to the real world via his mark of origin, a process involving multiple steps. By the time the scarred man finished appraising the corpses, nearly 2 hours had passed. The results, however, left Michael thrilled. $100,000. Michael felt overwhelmed with emotion. $100,000. The past him wouldn't have imagined earning this much in a day. Even the current him hadn't expected goblins to fetch such a sum. This was thanks to Michael's deliberate strategy of delivering intact corpses. The large quantity he sold, each goblin corpse averaging at least $300, had added up quickly. Had they been significantly stronger, like at the peak of their potential, the amount might have been a little higher. Most of the goblins didn't even surpass level 4. "I can see you killed these monsters with some sort of spear-like weapon," the scarred man said. "But even the one-hit kills show your inexperience. Since you've got money now, I suggest buying a spear technique manual and a decent weapon to go with it. Of course, this is just advice." "Thank you," Michael replied earnestly, surprised at how much the man could deduce just by examining the corpses. As he suspected, this scarred man was most likely an expert. As for the suggestion, Michael decided to give it a try. Training with a manual seemed far better than fumbling around without guidance. He might even unlock the spearmanship skill. The scarred man wasn't finished yet. Also, while it's good to push yourself, you need to control your emotions. If not, you risk losing yourself to the madness of killing, or worse, turning demonic. Look at yourself now. Don't you feel better? Michael paused, stunned. Though the man hadn't said it outright, he was likely referring to the murderous intent that Old Man Liu had mentioned earlier. He focused inwardly, just as the scarred man suggested, and noticed something. His thoughts felt calmer, clearer. It was hard to describe, but his mind felt more peaceful than it had hours ago. Is it because my murderous intent is subsiding? Michael wondered. Still, he thanked the scarred man. For some reason, 2 people had gone out of their way to help him today, and Michael was genuinely grateful. What he didn't realize was that their goodwill stemmed from him, too. "Okay, let's head back. Someone will come and take care of the corpses," the scarred man said to Michael as he approached a wheel-like controller on the wall and turned it. Instantly, the space grew colder. The room had already been cold, which was why no smell emanated from the corpses, but now the temperature plunged further. Michael guessed it was as cold as the storage room he'd been led to before, a temperature perfect for preserving bodies. After adjusting the cooler, the scarred man led Michael out of the room. They moved quickly, making their way to the front of the trade center. "All right, what do you want? I remember you saying you were here to buy something," the scarred man asked. "Yes," Michael replied. "What is it you're looking for?" the man asked again. "Let's start with a spear manual. Do you have one here?" Hearing Michael's request, the scarred man paused for a moment, a slight smile creeping onto his face. "I do have some," he said, "but I wonder, are you willing to hear another piece of advice from me?" Was Michael willing? Of course he was. While he didn't know the exact rank of the scarred man, Michael felt it had to be at least commander level, equivalent to rank 3 in the cultivation system. It could even be higher, as the scarred man exuded a far stronger presence than Old Man Liu. However, Michael, still inexperienced, was cautious about jumping to conclusions. Regardless, to the current Michael, both the scarred man and Old Man Liu were figures worth listening to. "Please advise me, Senior," Michael said reflexively, taking the role of a junior. His subconscious, influenced by countless readings on forums where high-ranking members were addressed as seniors and lower-ranking ones as juniors, had shaped this respectful response. "Haha, it's okay, just call me Teacher Brian," the scarred man said. Strangely, when Brian spoke and introduced himself as a teacher, it didn't feel out of place. It was as if he was simply stating a fact about himself. Michael, though confused as to why the scarred man had suddenly given a name, and one with teacher in it, quickly reacted. "Please advise me, Teacher Brian," Michael said, his tone just as enthusiastic as before. "Good," Brian nodded in satisfaction before continuing. "Right now, what you need is not fancy spear techniques but a strong foundation in the fundamentals. Only when you truly understand the basics of spearmanship can you advance smoothly on this path. Especially as an awakener, though I won't claim to know everything about your kind, I do know that you progress best when you fully grasp a skill. So, master the basics first before diving into the more elaborate techniques. And don't dismiss the basics just because they seem simple or weaker. In the end, even the most advanced techniques are just combinations of fundamental moves. Think of it like boxing: an uppercut, a jab, a side punch. They're all just punches, but they're incredibly effective when executed well. Listening to Brian's explanation, Michael felt as though he'd been enlightened. At the same time, it made him even more curious about Brian. Maybe he really is a teacher, Michael thought. Everything he says is simple to understand, yet profound enough to open new perspectives. Brian's advice made Michael happy, but it also deepened his desire to enter an academy. One piece of advice from Brian had already clarified and solidified his plans regarding spears. He couldn't help but imagine how much an academy could contribute to his future. Though Michael didn't doubt that his talent would allow him to grow independently, he knew that the path to power would likely be twice as difficult without the structured guidance an academy could offer. It reminded him of something his principal had once said: "While it's possible to cultivate alone, it's foolish to ignore the easier path laid down by the efforts of countless ancestors to make the journey smoother and less troublesome." Beyond just knowledge, an academy would also grant Michael access to resources and opportunities he couldn't easily find on his own, like rituals for undead summoning, for instance. "Then, is there any manual that teaches the basic techniques of spears, Senior?" Michael inquired. There is," Brian replied, "but you don't need to buy it here. You can just purchase the PDF version from the forum store." "PDF?" Michael was stunned. "Yes, what's wrong with that?" "And nothing," Michael stammered. To be honest, Michael had expected manuals like this to only exist in physical form, but a virtual version. Where was the respect for martial arts, the solemnity? Did none of that matter anymore? Had technology advanced so much that it had completely ignored tradition and feelings? As a flood of nonsensical thoughts ran through his head, Michael composed himself and spoke again. "Thanks for your advice, Teacher Brian. It's okay. Now that the manual is settled, is there anything else you want, or should I transfer your money to you?" "Actually, I'd still like to get something else. I wonder if there's anything here that can substitute the effect of a spirit crystal, especially something that affects the soul or enhances or recovers it." Brian contemplated for a moment before replying. "For the latter, items that enhance or recover the soul don't exist in a branch like this. But for the former, there is one item that can substitute the effect of a spirit crystal and even recover soul energy." "What is it, sir?" Michael asked, excitement creeping into his voice. "It's called Spirit Source Liquid. It's made by mixing the powder of a spirit crystal with other materials. It can boost the effectiveness of cultivation by 3 times for several days and costs about the same as a mana crystal, $4,500. It's mostly used by knight apprentices and rank 1 knights. For rank 1 mages, it can recover 20% of their soul energy, though it's rarely used by mages since spells requiring soul energy are usually beyond their reach at that rank." "Why does it cost the same as a mana crystal when it's only as effective as a mana stone?" Michael asked curiously. "It's because it's easier to absorb than a mana stone," Brian explained. "Mana stones contain impurities, so drawing energy from them takes time and effort. Spirit Source Liquid, on the other hand, works immediately. You just need to ingest it, and the effect kicks in right away." Hearing this, Michael finally understood. However, his primary concern wasn't cultivation. It was whether this liquid would be effective in gaining evolution points and how efficient it might be. "Could you please bring one for me to see?" Michael asked politely. "Sure," Brian replied. "But just so you know, we have different grades here. There's one that works for cultivator apprentices and rank 1 cultivators, and another for rank 2 cultivators. They have the same effects, but as you'd expect, the stronger the person, the need for a stronger resource and the higher the cost. The rank 2 version is slightly more expensive, priced at $7,000. Michael thought for a moment before responding. "Then please bring me one of each to see." Both prices were cheaper than an unranked spirit crystal, but Michael still needed to confirm whether the liquids were effective for his talent, and more importantly, how well, and if they could help him gain evolution points. After hearing Michael's request, Brian stepped to the side and brought out several transparent bottles filled with blue liquid, placing them on the counter. "On this side," Brian said, gesturing, "is the Spirit Source Liquid that works for apprentices and the rank above them, and on this side is the one effective for rank 2 cultivators. And don't ask why I brought out several bottles. You're probably going to use those eyes of yours to figure out which one's better. So, check them out. If you like them, I'll bring out more. I'm not going to waste time fetching extra bottles if you're not even planning to buy one." Brian's blunt words made Michael feel slightly embarrassed since they were entirely true. Michael had fully intended to use Detect to determine the quality of the liquids, and if he found a better one, would have asked for more. Thankfully, Brian had read his intentions from a mile away. Without wasting any more time, Michael activated Detect on the bottles displayed before him. "Unranked Spirit Source Liquid. Rank Common." It has a rank, Michael thought excitedly. If the liquid had a rank, it meant there was a chance for higher quality versions. Sure enough, after inspecting the other bottles, Michael found one. "Unranked Spirit Source Liquid. Rank Common." However, this higher quality was only found among the bottles of liquid effective for rank 2 cultivators. So to the panel, they're all unranked items, Michael noted. It made sense, though. These liquids were far inferior to an unranked spirit crystal, so it wouldn't make sense for them to be ranked higher unless they had something special about them. Still, this wasn't Michael's main concern. It was finally the moment of truth. Would Spirit Source Liquid have any effect on his talent and increase his evolution points? Under Brian's suspicious gaze, Michael nervously picked up the highest quality Spirit Source Liquid, unscrewed the cap, and swallowed the contents in one gulp. 1 second passed. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. +1 evolution point, +1 evolution point. Michael could hardly believe his eyes. He had hoped for something like this to happen, but now that it had, he found himself frozen, unable to react immediately. Noticing Michael's odd behavior, Brian spoke up. "Is something the matter?" he asked. Michael shook his head. "No, it's nothing," he replied, brushing off the question. Without wasting another moment, he grabbed another bottle of the better quality source liquid and drank it. Brian's gaze lingered, suspicion deepening, but Michael couldn't care less. He needed to confirm it, whether or not he had truly gained an evolution point. He knew he had. The notification panel confirming an additional evolution point had flashed before his eyes, but seeing it once wasn't enough. He needed reassurance, a second confirmation. Without hesitation, Michael unscrewed the cap of the source liquid bottle and downed its contents. It tasted bitter, but the thought that this could be another source of evolution points made it feel almost sweet. +2 evolution point. It works. Michael felt like jumping up in excitement, but he managed to control himself in the end. However, the panel that had just appeared puzzled him. Why had he gained 2 evolution points this time, while the previous bottle had only given him 1? A little confused, Michael turned his gaze to the spirit source liquids below 3 stars. Of course, he completely ignored the 1-star bottles. As he studied the source liquids and reflected on the inconsistency in evolution points from the 2 he had just consumed, a suspicion formed in his mind. But to confirm it, he needed to test his theory. Although Michael had plenty of money, spending it on experiments like this was far from economical. Yet, this situation was different. It was directly tied to his talent. If spending more money could help him gain evolution points or uncover a pattern, then it was worth every coin. To Michael, nothing money could buy compared to the effect of his talent. He was starting to view money as a mundane tool, a resource to fuel his growth. This was currently its only use, and the reason it was still important to have. With this mindset, Michael selected 3 2-star common rank source liquids and began consuming them one by one. The first bottle. Nothing. Am I wrong? Michael wondered, doubting his suspicion for a moment. But it was only the first try, too early to draw conclusions. Setting the empty bottle aside, Michael reached for the second source liquid. This time a notification flashed before his eyes. Another evolution point. Excitement surged within him. Unfortunately, the third bottle yielded nothing, leaving Michael with mixed emotions. However, his current experience made him believe his suspicion a little. Even within the same star rating, there are differences, Michael thought, and it made sense. For the 2-star source liquids, the ones that gave him nothing were likely inferior, barely meeting the 2-star threshold. Meanwhile, the one that granted him an evolution point was probably near the 3-star level, making it excellent. This also explained the variance in the 3-star source liquids he had consumed earlier. One had been inferior, while the other was either standard or excellent. Still, it was clear that 3-star source liquids were a better investment overall. At least, they seemed to guarantee a single evolution point most of the time. Are you okay, boy? Isn't taking too many of these going to harm you? Brian's voice broke through Michael's thoughts, pulling him back to the present. No, nothing like that, Teacher Brian. The source liquids don't affect me, Michael said casually, brushing the concern aside without offering further explanation. Then he added, also, could you bring out more of your stock for me to pick from? Brian paused and said nothing for a while. All right, but you do realize it's quite a hassle to move all this around, don't you? I'm only doing this because you're an awakener, and because I don't feel like making a fuss right now. Thank you, Teacher Brian. Michael quickly expressed his gratitude. He understood the man's frustration. To Michael, even the thought of someone asking him to bring multiple cups of milk just to pick a few and return the rest was annoying. Having to do it himself would have been better. Unfortunately, he couldn't be the one to grab the source liquids himself. Fortunately, Brian didn't seem to mind, at least not yet. As Brian went to retrieve more spirit source liquids from a corner, Michael turned his focus inward, calling up his status screen. Status. Name Michael Norman. Class Necromancer Apprentice. Level 9. Exp 112-2000. Strength 7312. Agility 13,120. Constitution 8912. Intelligence 34,340. Attribute points 24. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 10/18. Gift: Mark of Origin. He quickly navigated to the talent section, eager to confirm his progress. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Evolution points 15. Evolvable. Lucky Undead Verdant Wolf LV. 11 insufficient evolution points, can't be evolved. Prince Undead Verdant Wolf LV. 11 insufficient evolution points, can't be evolved. Undead Forest Wolf LV. 5 sufficient evolution points can be evolved. Undead Goblin LV. 5 sufficient evolution points can be evolved. Since leaving the crack, Michael had gained another 4 evolution points. It might not seem like much, but it was significant. Just one more point would allow him to evolve a 3-star common rank undead into a rare rank, and 2 more points could elevate a 1-star common rank creature to rare rank. 4 evolution points were a big deal. Michael was filled with happiness, yet it was tinged with frustration. The issue wasn't that he was reluctant to spend money now, it was that he didn't have enough. I still need to hunt more. Michael clenched his fists in determination, a glint of murderous intent flashing in his eyes. Anyway, Michael had already decided to apply for more crack entries after this. He couldn't help but sigh as his list of tasks continued to grow. Evolving his undead, boosting their strength and his own to finally explore the land of origin, entering dimensional cracks to earn money, which was now essential for acquiring evolution points to further enhance his power. It all felt overwhelming, but Michael knew he had to tackle every single task. Ah, Lucky. Oh, Lucky. You guys better work harder so your dad can buy more drugs. Michael earned a total of $100,000 from selling the goblin corpses to the association. In truth, the actual amount was a few $100s less, but Brian had rounded it up to an even $100,000 for him. To this, Michael didn't feel particularly appreciative. A single goblin corpse sold for $1,000, so in reality, Michael had given the association at least twice the value of the amount he received. As such, Brian's gesture didn't mean much to him. When Brian returned, the two of them began the process of selecting spirit source liquids. Fortunately, Michael managed to secure 10 more evolution points just as Brian's patience wore thin, and he was ready to send him off. The purchases included 5 bottles he used earlier, costing $24,000 in total, 3 bottles at $3,500 each, and 2 at $7,000 each. Additionally, Michael spent $70,000 on 10 more bottles. By the time he was done, of the $100,000 he had earned today, only a little over $6,000 remained. Just like that, Michael went from being a rich youth to a near pauper. Worse still, from the way things were going, he doubted this pattern would change anytime soon. If anything, he suspected he'd only get poorer in the future. Another thing was that Michael didn't sell all the corpses he had on hand. He kept 15 of them to attempt reviving later. After saying his goodbyes to Brian, who responded with barely more civility than before, Michael made his way to the receptionist. She greeted him with a teasing smile. Following a brief discussion, Michael booked the next 2 days for a grueling schedule of entering and exiting dimensional cracks. Though he would have to spend much of this time working with other teams, making money and gaining experience points was important. As for the toll of his murderous intent, Michael admitted to himself that he wanted nothing more than to take a break, to stop killing, and to stay still for a while. But the reality of his situation didn't allow for that luxury. Dimensional cracks were his only way to progress now. Between the pressing issue of the land of origin and his lack of qualifications to enter and awaken his academy, Michael simply couldn't afford to take things slow. All he could do was hope for the best, move with the flow, and pray that everything would turn out fine in the end. After wrapping up his business with the association, Michael made his way out of the building. This time he didn't hail a taxi, as he wasn't planning to head home. Instead, he turned his attention to finding a hotel nearby. It took a while, and by the time Michael finally booked a room, nearly an hour had passed since he'd left the association. The delay was partly because he wasn't just looking for a hotel close to the association, but one that also promised comfort. After a long day of killing, the last thing he wanted was to deal with two loud dogs making noise next door. He feared he might lose control and do something crazy. Admittedly, Michael could have found a hotel much faster if he'd used his phone, but it was dead. It was an old device, and since he had used it extensively in the Goblin World Crack to check the time, it had run out of battery by the time he reached the association. Luckily, the hotel he chose had a room equipped with multiple charging cables, so Michael plugged in his phone as soon as he settled in. After a quick shower to refresh himself in the hotel bathroom, Michael connected his consciousness to the land of origin. In another world, a pair of green eyes opened. It was evening in the real world, but in the land of origin, it was noon. The abandoned dorms Michael inhabited still carried a faint stench from the corpses he had left there, but thankfully, the smell was beginning to fade. Before starting anything, Michael fed his body an energy supplement, the last one he had on hand. While this body didn't feel hunger, he figured it wouldn't be fair to let it starve. Conveniently, he ignored the fact that this body hadn't had real food in 3 days. After feeding himself, Michael eagerly brought out all 10 bottles of source liquid he had purchased from the association and began consuming them one by one. By the 5th bottle, Michael had grown used to the bitter taste, but his stomach churned, and he felt like throwing up. Of course, he didn't give in. With tears in his eyes, he forced himself to finish the remaining bottles. When he was finally done, Michael felt awful. Between the energy supplement and the 10 soul energy recovery potions, he wondered if he was starting to turn into a drug addict. But as he checked his talent section, a sly grin spread across his face. It's worth it. Talent Infinite Evolution. Evolution points 29. Evolvable. Lucky Undead Verdant Wolf LV. 11. Sufficient evolution points can be evolved. Prince Undead Verdant Wolf LV. 11. Sufficient evolution points can be evolved. Undead Forest Wolf LV. 5. Sufficient evolution points can be evolved. Undead Goblin LV. 5. Sufficient evolution points can be evolved. Michael was ecstatic at the sight of his increasing evolution points. If not for the fact that it cost so much to accumulate them this way, he would have preferred this method over the daily refresh of points. However, his happiness remained undiminished. The next figures he saw beneath his total points made his heart race with excitement. Lucky Undead Verdant Wolf LV. 11. Sufficient evolution points can be evolved. Prince Undead Verdant Wolf LV. 11. Sufficient evolution points can be evolved. I can evolve them. I can evolve them again. I can evolve them. I can evolve them again. It felt like suddenly receiving double happiness, which made Michael grin a lot. Michael had always wondered about the evolution patterns of his undead. Evolving Lucky from a 2-star forest wolf to a 3-star common rank forest wolf had consumed 1 evolution point. Then, evolving Lucky to a rare rank undead had consumed 5 evolution points. Beyond that, Michael had no clue how many evolution points would be required for higher levels. When his evolution points accumulated to 10, there was no sign of being able to evolve Lucky or Prince. Even when it reached 15 at the association, there was still no indication that his 2 rare-rank undead could evolve further. Though Michael didn't dwell on it too much, it still weighed heavily on his mind. Evolving his undead was the fastest way for him to gain power, and since his undead were an extension of his strength, this also meant it was the quickest way for him to grow stronger. If his supposed shortcut to quick power turned out to be a long and arduous process, Michael couldn't help but feel a twinge of despair. However, the sight before him now reassured him a little. At least it didn't seem like evolving his rare-rank undead again would require an absurd 100 evolution points. The question now was, how many evolution points did it require? Unfortunately, Michael hadn't been keeping track of his accumulated evolution points. If he had, he might have noticed the exact amount required when Lucky and Prince could evolve again. But since he hadn't done that, the quickest way to get his answer was simple. He had to evolve one of his undead again. "Lucky," Michael called out excitedly. Calling out his undead's name wasn't necessary to summon them from the netherworld, but Michael was too thrilled to care. A greenish-black magic circle appeared in front of Michael, and his current favorite undead emerged from it. Unlike the last time, when it had immediately gone into a combat-ready state due to sensing its master's anxiety, Lucky seemed much more relaxed this time. It began to inspect its surroundings and quickly recognized the familiar place, the one with moss growing on the walls. With slightly bouncy steps, Lucky made its way to a section of the wall covered in moss and tore off a piece to chew on. A second later, it spat the moss out in confusion. Through the connection Michael shared with Lucky, he could vaguely understand its current thoughts. Why moss look tasty but moss no have taste? Michael's mouth twitched as he watched. "Lucky, come and stand in front of me," Michael said aloud. In fact, based on his previous experiments, Michael already knew it wasn't strictly necessary for his undead to be physically in front of him in order to evolve them. Though he hadn't figured out the exact range limit yet, he had a feeling that if his talent allowed it, he might be able to evolve any of his undead from a distance. Still, for now, he preferred to have them close by. This way he could observe their changes up close. Undead Verdant Wolf LV, 11. Rank Rare. Evolved to Rare for 25 evolution points. 25 evolution points. Michael nearly screamed. He had expected the next evolution requirement to be at least 20, but the additional 5 points felt manageable, yet daunting. Reflecting on the previous evolution patterns, Michael noticed something. The first evolution required 1 point, and the next required 5 times that amount. Now, the same pattern seemed to hold true. 25 evolution points were 5 times the previous requirement. This realization made Michael's forehead break out in a sweat. It can't be. Though he knew it was likely the case, Michael couldn't help but groan. If each subsequent evolution required 5 times the previous amount, then evolving Lucky again would demand at least, no, exactly, 125 evolution points. Michael groaned in frustration. Even if he managed to fill all his contract slots by reaching level 10, giving him 20 undead, and generating 21 evolution points per day, it would still take him 6 days to accumulate the required 125 points. While 6 days wasn't an unbearably long time, especially if he wasn't in a rush, Michael couldn't help but feel greedy for faster progress. At least he had uncovered a pattern. The next step was clear. Evolution points, show me your limit. Evolve. Once again, a bright light emitted from Lucky's body, assaulting Michael's eyes. However, just like before, he made sure to observe the changes occurring to his undead. Lucky let out a howl of pain, and Michael felt a pang of guilt, his chest tightening slightly. "Lucky, you must know I'm doing this for your good," he reassured, as much for himself as for his companion. Yes. It was definitely for Lucky's benefit, nothing else. The light grew brighter, and Michael watched as his undead's body expanded, becoming bulkier and larger until it reached an imposing height of 3 meters before finally stopping. "Fortunately, I can dismiss you back to the netherworld," Michael muttered with slight relief. "Otherwise, it'd be a challenge to manage you at this size, big guy." He waited with growing anticipation for the light surrounding Lucky to fade. When it finally dimmed, Michael got a clear view of his undead's new appearance. Lucky now towered at 3 meters tall, stretched about 4 meters in length, and was roughly 2 meters wide. Its presence was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, exuding an intimidating yet strangely captivating aura of primal beauty. Its skin retained its grayish-green hue, but was now adorned with striking red spots scattered across its body. Around its neck, a mane of brown vine-like growths with crimson-tipped ends had sprouted, giving it an even more feral and majestic appearance. Above all else, Lucky radiated a dangerous aura that sent chills down Michael's spine, though it also filled him with pride and excitement. This aura, even Michael couldn't tell exactly how strong his undead had become. It was already powerful before, but now it felt overwhelmingly so. Before he could pull up Lucky's profile to check its updated stats, several panels of information materialized in front of him. Your rare Undead Verdant Wolf has evolved to rare Undead Redthorn Wolf. Your Undead Redthorn Wolf has gained the skill Poison. Your Undead Redthorn Wolf Plant Control skill has advanced to Intermediate Mastery. Michael saw the new rank of his undead, and the grin on his face widened further. Spending 25 evolution points had not only increased Lucky's star rating, but also elevated it to 3 stars. Michael had always suspected that evolution didn't simply increase a star rating, but instead progressed the undead to the start of a new rank, reaching the upper limit of that rank before advancing further. However, he couldn't jump to conclusions just yet, not until he tested it by evolving one of the 1-star common goblin undead he had. What caught Michael off guard, though, was the new skill Lucky had gained. Not only had Lucky changed race again, but it also gained another racial skill, a particularly vicious one at that. Michael glanced at his undead, who was now eyeing the moss on the wall in front of it, seemingly debating whether to eat it or not. Michael decided not to call it back. With such an innocent demeanor, there was no need to worry about Lucky suddenly poisoning him. Aside from gaining a new skill, Lucky's previous ability, Plant Control, had advanced in mastery, delivering yet another dose of joy to Michael. But what made him the happiest was when he checked Lucky's profile panel and saw its new level. Redthorn Wolf LV, 18. Name Lucky. Exp 059800. Rank Rare. Skills Bite Plant Control Poison New. Master Michael Norman. Evolving his undead truly made them stronger, but Michael hadn't expected it to be this strong. Level 18, a whole 7-level increase. What made this even more impactful was the looming presence of the bigger problem, outside this abandoned dorm. The gargoyle, a level 21 monster. It was now only 3 levels above Lucky. Michael couldn't help but think, was there a chance, a good enough chance, that he could take the initiative to attack now? Plant Control, Intermediate Mastery Proficiency, 14.2%. A racial ability of the Redthorn Wolf species, Plant Control allowed them to manipulate plants within their surroundings and use mana to influence growth or movement. At its current mastery, the skill had a range of 100 meters. Poison Basic Mastery Proficiency, 7.5%. A racial ability of the Redthorn Wolf species, Poison enables the wolf to secrete a potent toxin through the thorned mane around its head. When the thorns make contact with a target, the poison spreads into their system, causing progressive weakening and damage over time. At its current mastery, the poison has limited potency, causing minor damage and reducing the target's mobility slightly. The toxin's effect lasts for 10 seconds and can only be inflicted at close range, requiring direct contact with the thorned main. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be SUPRISC for all of you. Stay tuned.